Welcome one, welcome all. This is Lions Central Radio, the episode you've all been waiting for, as the Lions are the final NFL team to get off the schneid, beating the Chicago Bears 37-34. Like I said, they are the final NFL team to get their victory. Made it an interesting way to do so, winning in overtime in this one. Plenty to get to here. Finally, some positive notes to take away from the Lions. Still a lot of negatives to get to, though, folks. So we'll break down this entire game. Kent Platt's going to be alongside for the ride for the duration of the show. We're also going to do a bit of a Vikings preview with Joel Schaefer of Pro Football Central. That's going to come at you a little bit later on. As always, though, I toss it over to you, Brandon, and I imagine this is going to be a little bit more upbeat show this week.
Yeah, I guess the only thing we could kind of maybe take issue with is that they didn't cover the spread. That would have been a little nice.
That
Instead
push.
we would have had this push.
Yeah.
Which, no fun for anybody, but I guess there's no reason to complain considering we haven't covered too many wins here yet. Folks, we also want to take this chance to thank you again for listening as you do each and every week, for interacting with us on social media, and for sharing the show. It's huge for us. We continue to see that growth, and we really thank you guys for telling another Lions fan, whether it be a family, friend, or a coworker. Please continue to click through that Amazon banner at lionscentralradio.com. Won't cost you a penny, and it helps out the show. Speaking of helping out, Joe Lombardi seemed to do something to help out his offense this past week. Instead of, I don't know, whatever you want to call he was doing before, outright sabotage, kind of, it smacks of he knew what he was doing. So I don't think we'll go that far. But, Kent, this is a bounce-back game for Stafford. How much of that is on Joe Lombardi?
You know, you guys know from my social media, I always refer to him as Coach Lino, Lombardi in name only. And that's the way it's been for the entire season so far. But I got to say, that wasn't a bad game for Joe Lombardi. There's a lot of stuff he did in that game that was new, that was, I'm not going to say innovative, but I guess for him it was. He did a lot of stuff to fake looks that he had done previously in the season to try to use stuff that he had done before that was getting sniffed out and use that against the Bears, and it worked. It was good to see. That said, I think more of it goes to Stafford and the way that he was playing. Lombardi did call a good game. I have to give him credit, even though it pains me to do so considering how he's been this season. But all the same, Stafford had a masterful game. He had a couple of moments where he made some mistakes, but for the most part, he was making his reads correctly. He was throwing to the perfect spot. He was throwing with touch, which we all know he doesn't do very often very well. It was a great game for Stafford, and he owes some of that to Lombardi.
Yeah, the raw numbers for Stafford in this one, folks: 27 of 42 for 405, 4 TDs, and then 1 lone pick. In regards to Lombardi, Brandon, it's hard to put praise on him just because there's been so much bad. It's kind of like blind squirrel finds a nut with this one. Until you see more of a track record and more consistency with games like this, where he does attack weaknesses in a defense, where he does make adjustments, and where he does really exploit what you want to see him exploit. And even when in a game where Amir Abdullah, who he did try and force feed the ball, 14 carries, he wasn't going, but he realized where to make changes and where to make adjustments. We haven't seen that where we've needed to throughout the season. We'll kind of hold expectations, I would think, after this one, but it is at least a positive sign for the rest of the season, I would hope.
Well, I'm not going to go as far as the rest of the season because that's putting the cart before the horse.
Exactly.
We've seen him act once, so yay, that's great. You did your job for a week, but I think Ken hit a lot of the points that I wanted to make, or at least I'm going to claim I was going to make those.
That's why we bring him on the show.
I know you don't want to use the word innovation, but slight tweaks. Is that a solid compromise? He did those slight tweaks where he showed the formations he would use before, but instead it would be there was a specific play I remember seeing and go, well, that's different. It was Amir Abdullah kind of doing a counter to the weak side of the field and nobody pretty much flowing that way, and it worked perfectly. You could see in the game before when the tight end would go in motion that the entire defensive line would shift over, knowing, okay, the play is going to the strong side. The play would go to the strong side, and the play would get stuffed. So shocking that these little tweaks would help out and they would work so well. I kind of actually backed myself into a corner during the game because Stafford started making some bad decisions there at one point. Obviously, that INT was going to be something that I understand what he was trying to do, and it does fit in with who he is. Obviously, that's what you would hope the coaching staff would be able to get out of his mind. But as I tweeted out earlier today, this is kind of who Stafford is. It's what we've talked about for going on a year or two now. It's just limited those decisions. And one thing I really loved from Stafford's game this week was his taking off. That's something that Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers, even Tom Brady occasionally, not very often, they do. If you're going to give them those 7 yards, they're just going to take it. I don't know how many times I've seen Rodgers just take off, Andrew Luck just take off and slide and pick up a first down when it looks like the play is stuffed. And this time he didn't hesitate. I'm not saying we want him out there banging for extra yards on every drive, but it was something we saw him do very well. In fact, I think he was Detroit's second leading rusher. Yeah, 6 carries, 37 yards. So he did have the highest average outside of Isa Abdul-Quddus, which, well, we'll probably keep that one out.
He did have a slide that looked RG3-ish.
Oh, it was awful.
That first run that he had, and you're like, oh, don't do that, no.
Well, it's kind of the bad and the good with Stafford, right? He's going to do weird things.
And we saw Stafford finally get involved in the vertical pass game, which we've been hoping for week after week, to Calvin Johnson when they were in the hurry-up offense and really moving the ball that way. Kent, just kind of on his decision-making, what did you think of it overall, from moving the ball down the field vertically to the short passing game to taking off and running when he needed to? Then there was also that pick. Just overall, what did you think of him and his decision-making in this one?
Well, we've talked before about how Stafford has such a quick release. He gets rid of the ball so quickly. And the pressure tends to get to Stafford when he does get pressure, and part of that's because he's used to getting rid of the ball so quickly. One of the things that they did really well this week was they were able to find ways to get his first read open. And there were times where he didn't, his touchdown to Tim Wright's a really good example, where he scanned the field, didn't see anything, and had to make a quick decision on the fly. But a majority of his passes were to his first read, and they were doing a really good job of getting that first read open. The difference between this week and previous weeks where that has happened on occasion is that Stafford was actually putting the ball where it needed to be. He wasn't throwing it behind his receivers on a slant. He wasn't throwing it above the head of somebody running a drag route, so they had to go up and get it instead of catching it in stride. He was putting the ball right where it needed to be. And I think that they started doing the same thing that they did with Cutler a few years back, where they took all the actual thought out of the game. They just said, here, 1, 2, 3, bam, bam, bam. Another part of that, and this is something I want to really get into with the actual game film, is I think that they removed some of the option routes from the play calling. There was still some, but that's been a big issue with miscommunication, is people running option routes and running either the wrong option or a different one than what Stafford wanted. And I think that they took that out to an extent against the Bears, and it worked. It worked for Stafford. He's the guy can make good decisions, but you don't really want him sitting there thinking about stuff.
Right. And it's kind of funny that you bring that up, because I think it was probably about this time exactly a year ago that we were saying, oh, Joe Lombardi is going to dumb down the offense. So at this point, how dumb is the offense? Like, is it literally just the type of flip book that you got in Pee Wee football? That's about 12 plays.
But yeah, I think what they did last year is they removed plays. And this year, they kept the plays, they just removed the options and just had people running routes, going out and running routes and doing actual football plays instead of trying to overcomplicate simple things.
Well, and whatever it was, it worked for the most part. And as I was kind of getting to earlier before I started meandering away from it, but I kind of backed myself into a corner with an angle probably about the third, fourth quarter, because we started seeing Stafford make some dumb decisions. That INT to Riddick. There was an almost interception just before, I think it was halftime, where the linebacker was completely draped all over Amir Abdullah. It was like 3rd and 8, and Abdullah had ran like a 2-yard out. Why Stafford threw that ball, I'll never understand, and there were just a couple inconsistent passes. But the fact the guy ended up with, I think, a passer rating somewhere north of 117, I think.
Yeah.
So it was incredible to see that, especially because I think just last week, what was it, Nick? You said he couldn't win something like that. I don't know. I always forget.
He couldn't win what?
Well, pretty much anything. I thought you were all ready to give up on him.
This is a win over the Chicago Bears. Let's temper this here just a little bit. Fair enough. Again, it's a win against a team that's going to end up with a losing record in all likelihood. So we still need to see this team play good against quality opponents, especially on the road. But getting to that defense, and we also need just the negatives in this game. The defense and the turnovers are the big ones. Defense still gave up 34 points. The Bears did have a resurgent Alshon Jeffrey in their lineup, really making things happen, but Kent, I guess I'll go to you here. Why did this defense give up so many points? What was the biggest issue for the Lions?
It was mostly personnel. The defense didn't have very many breakdowns on play calling. There was some late, and I know Brandon for sure is going to look right at this one, which was late in the game deciding, hey, I'm going to put 5'8" Josh Wilson on Alshon Jeffrey and see how that goes out.
Yep.
So I'm not. I love Terrell Austin, but there's no defense of that. But earlier in the game, it wasn't really the play calling that was causing the problems. It was a lot of player errors, which we've seen earlier in the season. The point total is a little bit deceptive. 3 of the Bears' scoring drives and 17 of their points were off of the 3 turnovers that they have, the pick and then the 2 muff punts. I think the average drive of those 3 was like 22 yards. So it's a little bit deceptive with the points, and for the most part, they were doing good things, especially in the second half. I know it didn't look like it because the passing game was all over the place. But it really came down to what was the Lions were doing on offense. The Bears were doing the same thing. They were getting those big plays. Darius Slay actually had a good game, but fans are going to point to that big long pass that he gave up as proof that he didn't, because those are the plays that stand out. Yep. I know that he not only a few plays later he deflected a pass that would have been a touchdown if he hadn't got in and got it. He had another one during overtime where he did the same thing. Rasheed Mathis had that awful pass that he gave up where I don't know what he was even doing in coverage. But he made up for it with a pick right after that, so you got to give him credit for that part.
In the end zone, no less, yeah.
Right. It's mostly player issues, though. I mean, they're clearly hurting in the middle of their defensive line, and now they lost Jason Jones, who was the only one who was making the loss of Nada and Walker somewhat tolerable, was that they could still get that interior rush from stunts from Jason Jones, and now they don't even have that anymore. They're really, really thin. I mean, you got to realize we're playing a not good Karan Reed and Ishmaeli Kitchen and Andre Fluellen, who were signed this week at defensive tackle, and it really looked like that's exactly what we had. I mean, it showed.
Well, and there were the beat writers were talking about it, that Fluellen looked like the best defensive tackle. That's not.
Oh gosh.
They're totally right too.
Yeah, I mean, this is a defense that definitely needs Haloti Nada back, but the Haloti Nada of a couple years ago, not the guy we've seen in limited doses this year. The defense did have a lot of issues. I thought Abdul Qudus is going to get a lot of love because of that punt fake, and from what I've seen, and I can't tell, somebody was crediting Abdul Qudus with that call. I don't know if he audible to it, which would make sense considering, and we'll get into it in a little bit, Jim Caldwell's decision how to finish that drive, and finish being a in air quotes, if you will. But he did not. He has trouble in the open field getting off blocks. I don't know how that's possible. It's like he doesn't even know that they're around him. His awareness rating in Madden has to be somewhere in like the low 30s. It's like he has no idea these guys are coming, and then he gets blocked out of a play. I granted this is high school, but from what I can remember, it is so difficult to block somebody in the open field because you can move anywhere you want. I don't know what Abdul Qudus' thing is there. Maybe he gets caught looking at the running back or the play too much, and I'll have to dig more into the tape for that. But that was one of the biggest takeaways. Is I can't believe how much this defense missed James Ahedebo.
Well, it always looked to me, and I think you'll get it right after I make the comparison, but Abdul Qudus is like the reverse Louis Delmas. He doesn't go for those big tackles. He doesn't go for that contact. And Delmas did it all the time and often missed because he also made bad decisions with where he was going with it. But it seems like Qudus is trying to go for the right angle, and he waits until the last possible moment to make that decision, then waits about a half a second more, and then makes that decision. And I think that's part of it. He's never in the best position to do anything.
While we're on the defense, one other guy that I noticed, or really in this game didn't, was Ezekiel Ansah shot. Brandon, what did you see from Ansah, and really just lack thereof? I don't think he showed up on the stat sheet whatsoever.
Well, it's interesting because, and I only got through the first half of the tape today, kind of a long day, and didn't have my computer yesterday, but I even tweeted out during the game, I didn't even realize he was playing half the time until he got that penalty. I'm like, it doesn't seem like he was there. And then I go look at Pro Football Focus, and he had 6 quarterback hurries and 2 quarterback hits. I do remember him getting some pressure late in the game, but I thought that he had a real good chance of dominating this matchup, especially with Bushrod out. Not that Bushrod is a great left tackle by any means, but you're talking about not the starter. So I was a little perturbed by that. Ken, did you see something different?
A little bit, but I was paying more attention to the defensive tackles, and I think that's what it comes down to. Jay Cutler could step up all day, and he could step to his right all day, because even before Jason Jones got hurt, he's never been that collapse the pocket type guy. He's better at sealing the edge than collapsing the pocket. So there was no threat from Ansah, and they even left him on an island at times, and he would beat his guy. But there was so much room for Cutler to go because the other three guys on that line were doing almost nothing that it didn't even matter. There was another instance, and this isn't Ansah, but it's a good example of how that pocket was getting moved around by Cutler, was when they tried to blitz Slay earlier in the game, and I think they did it with Wilson a little bit later in the game. But he didn't even pay attention to him because they were already moving in a different direction. The line was moving those defensive tackles where they wanted to be, and Cutler was just dictating where the pocket was going. And I think this is part of when we first got Sue and we didn't really have anybody else on the line, is that you can neutralize a good player just by exploiting the fact that there aren't any other good players there.
Well, then, Ken, I guess moving forward, and not to jump ahead and look too far ahead to the Vikings game, but the offensive line around Ansah is getting worse or less healthy, not more healthy. So what does Detroit do to try and keep probably their best one of their best defensive options in the game and still able to make a difference?
He's always had a better matchup against the Vikings, and they've done a lot of different things since Zimmer got there. But he's gonna try to go back to those blitz packages that he used. Not just the defensive back blitzes using Slay and Wilson, but if Ahedebo's back, you're probably gonna see him playing in the line on right next to Ansah quite a bit more. I don't think they'll do that with Caduce. I don't think that he has the skills to do it as much. But I think they're going to try to put whoever's blitzing on that side to try to go like an overload blitz. But just that concept, using Ansah to beat his guy and then getting space for somebody else to run through right next to him, because that forces the defense or the offense to give a little bit more attention to that side. And if they're doing that, then maybe one of those other three guys could get something going.
Well, that's a big maybe.
It is, but when you're as depleted as they are right now, you got to work with something.
Well, and it's the seventh linebacker that, I've gotten so few things right on this podcast this year. I'm going to go ahead and bring that back up. When I said Brandon Copeland would make the team, you saw him out there trying to rush the passer at the end of that game, and surprisingly, it's something they actually needed, or sadly enough, it is something that they actually needed. There hasn't been an update, though, on Jones, right? I mean, we record on Tuesdays, so normally Caldwell sends out emails to everybody who wants to know anything about any injuries, but I didn't get mine today. Anybody else?
Must have missed it.
Yeah, me too. But Jones has always had that injury bug, though. Last year was really his only healthy year. It's always been a concern with him, and they've tried to build up the depth there. Devin Taylor's had his moments, but it's give and take with what we have at that position right now.
Well, and speaking of give and take, T.J. Jones, you have literally one job on this team. I don't know that he runs many routes.
You had one job.
Catch the ball. And it's, this isn't, we're not going to talk about the Michigan game, but watching that back-to-back on 2 different days, like, what's the difference here? Oh, one guy's getting paid. Do your job. But is this a real big issue going forward? The 2 main guys who were supposed to be returning kicks and punts are not holding on to the ball. And granted, the Corey Fuller thing, I guess the rule technically is because he's engaged, he can get thrown into the ball, whatever. We'll leave that alone. But Ken, who do you think should be returning kicks next week?
Oh man, that's a tough one for me. So I like Jones, and I like Jones coming into the season. I had him pegged as getting that punt returner and kick returning job before he even had it. Pat myself in the back, and then immediately retract said pat because things like that happen. He was Jeremy Ross in this game. That's exactly what he was. He took the ball out when he had no blocking to speak of. When he had that 15-yard run back where he got stuffed on the 15-yard line, right when he got that ball, you could tell the blocking wasn't going to be there.
Yep.
There was already guys coming through that line. You knew that was a bad idea, and he did it anyway. And then later he put the ball on the turf, and you're just like, oh, great. You can't go full Jeremy Ross, man. You got to back off a little bit. But it didn't help when they did anything else. We don't really have a great returning option, and we have one of the worst coaches in the NFL for the return game. Marciano is not a good special teams coach when it comes to that sort of thing. He's been doing wonders with the coverage team units, to be honest, compared to what I expected him to do. But as far as this return team, I don't think he has any idea what he's doing. And it's more than just putting the ball on the turf and Corey Fuller getting way too close to the ball than he should have been. We've had way too many penalties on special teams, and those three things, putting the ball on the turf, not knowing when to come out and when to stay back, and then penalties, that's all on coaching. And he's not as bad as our offensive coach, but he's definitely not a strength in terms of coaching for this team.
While we're on the subject of fumbles, Brandon, I got a bit of a bone to pick with you, my friend.
Okay.
I believe it was back in the preseason I had mentioned it was good to see Amir Abdullah protecting the football because he'd had his fumble issues in college, and you said that those issues were already resolved and it wouldn't be an issue moving forward. And here we are, and it sure seems like an issue.
Yeah, but if you look at those stats, the things that everybody brings up when they talk about those fumbles, and I'm trying to pull it up right now since you're bringing it on just out of nowhere.
Right. That's what we do on the show.
Of course we can. Anyways, the point is that I think he had something like 60 or 75% of those fumbles came his freshman and sophomore year. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he had cut it down by such a large margin, but to that point, should have indicated that he kind of had figured out what he was doing wrong. It obviously didn't happen. I don't know what the big difference was, because that game was atrocious. That was just put the ball away. You have to protect it. I mean, we have seen guys though learn to protect the ball better as their professional careers have gone along. Adrian Peterson, although he's had his issues this year, but most notably Tiki Barber. I'll never forget the first time I saw him running with the ball with the I can't even explain that. Yeah, and his arm just all stiff and straight, but it worked. So whatever that is, maybe Abdullah needs to watch some tape there. While we're on this subject, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the most disappointing, because we do have to talk about something real quick, or at least I need just 14 to 43 minutes of airtime to finish this rant on Jim Caldwell finishing off a drive in which he called a fake punt, presumably, with a field goal when he is down by 7. I understand that Jim Caldwell said, and he's right, that he did have all 3 timeouts.
Yeah.
And they were ahead of the 2-minute warning. So, technically, yes, you have 4 chances to stop the clock. And the rushing defense had done pretty darn well in the second half. They really kind of shut down Matt Forte there. But what about that defense overall? The one that had given up, 31 points to that to that point?
Yeah.
Gives you the gall to kick a field goal when it's 4th and 4 from the 13. I understand doing that when you're down 10 and you kick that 45-yard field goal, saying we need to get the ball back, that way we can throw some Hail Marys. This is being at the 13-yard line and needing 4 yards. I can't let that go.
And it was asinine, in my opinion. And I mean, they end up getting the stop that they needed. But you saw just a little bit later, Chicago went and marched down, in 21 seconds and got the score they needed to force
69
overtime.
69 yards.
Yeah, 69 yards without a timeout, mind you. They were all out of them, right? They just moved down the field, and might have been 3, maybe 4 plays. I'm not sure exactly how many plays they used, but yeah, I mean, it worked out for Detroit, and it's not going to be a major storyline because Detroit found a way to win the football game. But I don't know how you go conservative there and go field goal, and even though it works, there's no way that's the right call, right, Kent?
I'm going to have to defend Jim Caldwell here.
Oh, God. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Let me explain why. See, what I think...
Here's Mike, Nick.
Yeah, Kent, we appreciate you coming on the show.
That's at MathBomb.
Right? What I think happened is that Jim Caldwell decided to have a rare moment of humor on the sidelines. And they asked him what play he wanted to call, and he said, a field goal. And then his mic cut out. Because that is the only explanation I could come up with as to how that would happen to any sane person. I mean, it didn't just pass through him. It went through him and Marciano and Lombardi. All 3 of those guys got together, and they all said, that sounds like a good idea.
I wish I could I might have to try to find on the tape if there's any shot of Matthew Stafford's face when that call came across, because I don't what
I'm
what?
sure you won't find it because it's probably right buried into his face, kneeling down.
Based on some of Golden Tate's reactions this season, his might have been even better.
Yeah, that's a good point, because Kent's the math guy. You know how people say that I feel smarter after talking to you because I learned so much? I feel dumber after Kent comes on the show, because half the time I don't even understand what the heck he just said. So if he can't find or some type of statistical probability, because I just run off common sense, there's just no explanation here at all. I don't understand it.
The math actually points in the exact opposite direction of what Caldwell did. Everything was screaming for you to go for it there.
I will never understand that decision. And if Detroit ends up going 11-5 and winning the Super Bowl, and then Mayhew has a press conference the next day and says, we have decided to part ways with Jim Caldwell, I won't question it. That's how unbelievable that call was to me.
Needless to say, Jim Caldwell was your most disappointing from this effort.
Yes. Granted, he's not a player, but, well, he definitely had a role in this game.
Let's start to tie a bow on this one. My most disappointing, the aforementioned Amir Abdullah, his 14 carries for 48 yards. We've covered him a little bit at length. And just some injuries to talk about. Really unfortunate one here is Zach Zenner, whose season comes to an end. Caldwell got straight to the point on this injury update. It was broken ribs and a collapsed lung for Zenner. Joik Bell had mentioned that he talked to him before he went to the hospital. He's going to be placed on IR. I'm not sure if it has actually. It had to, because they brought up George Wynn, right?
Yes, so they made that announcement a little while ago.
Okay, so George Wynn has been called up. So offensive lineman Michael Ola signed off San Diego's practice squad. The team also waived Taylor Boggs.
Yay.
And just to wrap these up, Joik Bell, Eric Ebron, Brandon Pettigrew, and Haloti Nada could all be back this week. We will wait on bated breath for Jim Caldwell's updates as the week progresses.
Well, and with that, let's just move on from this. I understand it's a win, but somehow I still came out of this game recap angrier than last week. Only Jim Caldwell could do this to somebody. Maybe on the other side of this quick little break, and we literally mean like 1 second, Joel Schaefer from ProFootballCentral.com can help us understand what's going on here. All right, you want to add him in?
Yep, I'm sending the email now, or the invite now.
I'm so proud I didn't cuss there.
That was very nice.
I think we all wanted to. I mean, I'm amazed that everything worked out the way that it did.
Yeah,
when the Bears came back and tied the game, I thought for sure it was over. I was like, they're gonna fucking do it again. I thought so.
Yeah.
Seemed like it was going that way.
It's not like Chicago didn't have plenty of opportunities.
Oh, that's Fox made just as many blunders as Caldwell did.
Well, Justin Rogers had a great tweet. It was a race to the last mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was. Well, John, what was that? The last pass they had that rookie D3 safety covering Calvin Johnson one up. Was that the last pass of that?
Genius.
I mean, which makes putting Josh Wilson on Alshon Jeffrey defendable.
Right.
He's confident.
I think that's when John Fox noticed that was going on. He was like, "No," it's like I have to one up with him. I can do better than that.
Let's see if this guy knows.
Yeah, it's right on time. We told him 9, right? So.
Yeah, and I DM'd him a few minutes ago. I was like, we're running a couple minutes late. So I saw what time it was.
All right. Well, I sent him 2 invites. So.
Yeah, I just DM'd him back, said you should have it now. He said he accepted the invites.
There we go.
Shit. Are you on your computer or phone? Fuck. I know I sent Purcell an email detailing this a while ago. Should have asked. I'm a little nervous because I don't know much about this dude. See how this goes.
Okay.
Nick. Shit. Oh, damn it. It just got deleted. Just hit the 30-day mark for the one I sent Nick. I'm not rewriting that shit.
No. I mean, all I can do is send him another one and hope this one works.
Right. Well, I'm hoping he'll just get back to me so I can tell him, either if he tells me if he's on his phone or computer, I can walk him through the appropriate step.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Joel.
There we go.
Yes, hey, there we go. How are you fellas doing today?
Very well. Yourself?
I am doing excellent.
Perfect.
Yeah, so Joel, we're just going to run through a couple questions about the Vikings-Lions game with you, some stuff about Teddy Bridgewater, and then kind of the strengths and weaknesses of Minnesota's team.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good for me.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pause for a second and then jump into it with you.
Sounds good to me.
And we are now joined on the podcast by Joel Schaefer from Pro Football Central. You can find him on Twitter at AirJoeMax21. Joel, getting right into kind of the meat of what's going on with the Vikings, there's a lot of questions going on about Teddy Bridgewater. He's only had, 3 touchdowns in 5 games now. To you, how has he looked? I mean, what's the reason for this struggle over the last couple games?
I won't ever call it a struggle with Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy is he had a one bad throw last game where he tried to force the ball into tight box early in the game in the first drive. Other than that, I mean, he's looked fine. The Denver game, he was not really asked to do a ton. And when you have a guy named Adrian Peterson in the backfield, you're not expecting to throw the ball for 400 yards. I mean, I don't see it as a struggle thing. I think that when he's played a total of 16 games now in the league, you can't really make a point to say he's struggling. He doesn't have the offensive line that's helping him out a lot at this point in his career either. But to call it a struggle, I don't see that. I think that he's been passing just fine and doing everything. He just hasn't put the ball in the end zone.
Well, and you brought up that offensive line. It ended up, we kind of thought it was going to be a weakness for Minnesota going into that game against Detroit. It ended up being the opposite. It was a very big factor in the game, but a positive one for Minnesota. Has it stayed successful throughout the season so far?
No, he got killed against the Broncos. I think they said that game, and he was on his feet a lot more. He did throw for like 267 against the Chiefs, and that was his game. That was his game to win it.
We got to cut real quick. You're coming in really bad. You there? Joel, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
All right, because you're coming in like we can't make out the words. Do you want to test real quick, or?
Give me a second here. I'm going to try something.
Okay.
For some reason, my wife's phone is the one that's picking up my Hangouts. So I'm trying to use her phone, and I wasn't connected to my Bluetooth.
Ah.
We got it yet?
Yeah, you sound better.
We're working on it. How's that sound? Is that better?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so what we'll do is I'll just wait a second, and then I'll come back, and I'll ask you that offensive line question again.
Sure.
So, Joel, you brought up that offensive line, and it ended up playing a big role in the first game, in the first matchup between these two teams. Has it been able to sustain the success that it had against Detroit in Week 2?
Not really with the Denver game. Teddy got sacked 7 times. He was hit in multiple digits. I can't even remember how many hits it was. It was just absolutely frustrating, and you didn't have Adrian Peterson going off. And that's, if they're not running the ball, Teddy's not going to have success.
Well, and Adrian Peterson has had success this season. He's averaging 5 yards a carry. I think he's ranked 8th in the league in rushing. Is his success just because he's Adrian Peterson, or is the offensive line doing all right in run blocking?
Well, the first game versus the 49ers, he was terrible. He wasn't hitting the holes. You can consider it rust. You can consider it whatever you want to consider it. But also he ran for 2.1 yard per carry last week against Kansas City and 20 touches, and it was 62 yards, if I'm not mistaken. Off the top of my head, it was something like that. So,
well, I mean, I guess
part of it is what they're doing with the box. If they're trying to play a cover 2 over the top, or if they're going to try to stop Adrian with 9 men in the box.
Well, so obviously the running game has been a big strength for Minnesota, and it has helped them pile up that 3-2 record. What about the other side of the ball? We know that they have a pretty solid defense. There's a lot of young talent on that side of the ball. Mike Zimmer is a very solid defensive coach. But what are the weaknesses of Minnesota's defense this year?
The other safety is the biggest weakness on that line right now. We're talking about whoever plays the opposite of Harrison Smith is what I mean by the other safety. Whether it's Robert Blanton, who is not a good safety. Sendejo is okay. Andrew Sendejo, he's okay. He's a marginal safety in the league. He's not a starter. He's more of a backup. And Antoine Exum Jr. in his second year just obviously isn't getting it. Otherwise, he'd be having the field time. And they ended up picking up Brock Vereen on waivers. Who knows if they're going to play him. He was the Bears, and he's only in the second year. Obviously, they let him away from him for some reason, but who knows what that is at this point.
And Joel, before we let you go, we got to get you out of here on this. What is your prediction for Sunday's game?
Well, honestly, this is what it depends on. If the Lions decide to abandon the run again, if they decide to actually run Amir Abdullah like they should and give him 20 touches and win that game. If they don't, it's going to be a long day because Stafford wanted to quit in the third quarter against after he got hit like 30 times, or so it seemed. But he passed the ball over 40 times against the Vikings. If they decide to have the same coaching, it's based on what the Lions do. If they decide that they want to try to stick with the run and pound the ball, that's the way to beat the Vikings right there.
You can find him on Twitter at AirJoeMax21, and he writes for Pro Football Central as well. Thanks, Joel, for stopping by.
Not a problem. Have a good day.
All right, thanks. All right, I ejected him from the call.
All right.
Oof. I don't know if we can use any of that.
I'll see what I can cut up and make do.
All right, you're a fucking wizard if you can get anything out of that.
I think I'll just keep his first question. I'll keep the second when I asked him the second question again. I'm gonna have to cut off the end of some of that shit though.
You can't. Oh, you can't use that prediction or the defensive weakness because I mean there was a kid overpowering whatever he was saying.
All right. Well, when we come back in, then I'm just gonna say, hey folks, sorry about the choppy interview. We had to cut out some stuff due to technical difficulties, but on with the show to whatever.
All right. Hey, Kent, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey, there he is.
Right on.
Sorry if you heard any of that. It was just awful. But so
I think he was driving.
He was.
So I'm gonna bring it back, or you'll bring it back in with that, Brandon, about the technical difficulties. Toss it right to Kent for the biggest advantage for Detroit.
All right. Folks, we apologize for the choppy interview. We had some technical difficulties there, so we had to cut out some stuff, unfortunately. We really thank Joel Schaefer again of ProFootballCentral.com of joining us. That is AirJoeMax21, AirJoeMax21. Thanks again, Joel, and we'll have you on again, I'm sure, next time they play the Vikings. Kent, turning to this Minnesota game, where do you see the biggest advantage for Detroit in this matchup?
Yeah, if the Lions get Ebron back, that's probably going to be their best weapon is attacking the seam. They don't do it very often. They started to against the Bears, and it worked well. The first touchdown to Lance Moore was a good example of what they can do if they're actually using Ebron right. It's been frustrating to watch them use him this year because when he does things like that, he does it well. But Lombardi has this weird thing where he has him run these 2-yard hitches or flat routes, and that's like it most of the time. But if Ebron comes back and he's legitimately healthy and they're using him the same way that they were using Tim Wright and Lance Moore, I think that's going to be big. If they don't, or he's not healthy, then it's probably going to be Lance Moore. I've eaten a lot of crow for how Lance Moore has been playing lately because I didn't expect him to do well. But he's coming into his own, and actually having a third receiving option that can get the job done is going to be huge against a team like Minnesota.
Yeah, and I'll look at the other side of the ball. I agree with what Kent just said. We all know of the Eric Ebron and what he can do. Defensively, the pass rush, and we've talked about this.
Sorry, but anytime you say something like that about Eric Ebron, you're going to get a large laugh out of me.
Oh, well, I say it. It's for the audience to figure out if I'm being honest or if it's just all sarcasm, and I'll leave that to the imagination. But the defensive line, we've talked about how banged up it is, but Minnesota's offensive line, and if you guys could hear what Joel was saying, he was getting at how bad Minnesota's offensive line is, and Bridgewater's been sacked, I think before it was 13 times, tied 10th worst in the NFL, and you saw it really bad in the opener against the Niners. This offensive line isn't good, and Ezekiel Ansah shot is one of the elite pass rushers in this league, and we don't know if he's going to be able to get open and be able to rush because you're going to key in on him with how many issues there are along Detroit's defensive line. But when you have an elite pass rusher against a really bad offensive line, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I love the matchup of Ansah being able to get to Bridgewater, where so many players that aren't as good as him have already this season.
Well, in my point, or my biggest advantage for Detroit in this game kind of piggybacks off yours, and it's, as you brought up, it's health dependent. That offensive line isn't good. They gave up 7 sacks against Denver, but it's Denver. Part of that has to be taken with a grain of salt just because they are very, very good on that side of the ball. But the running defense for Detroit is actually pretty stout, even with when they had to use guys like Karan Reed in the middle and Jermel Cujo, which obviously isn't advantageous for Detroit, but they were able to make it work, and also without DeAndre Levy, so they can get Haloti Ngata back, and if Jason Jones plays, it could really help put Teddy Bridgewater in more of those third and long situations, and that pass rushing advantage that you just brought up can come into play as well.
Wow. So now normally we toss to Kent here, but I think in the 100-some episodes or however many game episodes we've done here, Brandon, this is the first time where we've completely disagreed on the advantage-disadvantage, because I went with the biggest advantage for Minnesota being Adrian Peterson and the rushing offense. So I guess we'll let Kent play a little bit of jury here on this, because I went with Peterson just in the first matchup. He tore up Detroit. I think it was 134 yards on 30 carries or 29 carries, somewhere in there. And he's averaging 5 yards a carry this season. He's having a great year. And with the injuries Detroit has on the interior of that defensive line, I don't see any way that they're able to slow him down in this game. I see it as a huge advantage for Minnesota. So, Kent, you've got both sides of this one. What do you think?
Oh, gosh. You know, both of the lines for the Lions have had their struggles, both offensive and defensive lines. We've had a ton of issues, obviously, with the offensive line getting anything done, and I don't think that they're going to be able to do that much against Minnesota. It was their worst game they had against Minnesota, especially from the tackles. Tackles were just dreadful against Minnesota. The defensive line, Ansa's the man, and if they can do anything to get him open, whether it's bringing pressure, like I mentioned, from somebody like a Hedebo going on his outside and trying to pull that overload pressure, or if Jones comes back, or if Taylor has a day, yeah, that's going to be where they're going to win. Bridgewater's a good quarterback, but he's been getting hit a lot, and he's still a young quarterback. Young quarterbacks that get hit a lot tend to make pretty bad mistakes. And Bridgewater doesn't make a lot of bad mistakes, but when he does, they're pretty terrible mistakes.
Well, and that's kind of the hope, I guess, is that he'll have a repeat performance from last year when he had, 3 picks, I think, in the first meeting they had last year, with Tahir Whitehead being the beneficiary of some tipped balls. I guess the thing with Adrian Peterson, a lot of those runs, they weren't up the gut. Even a lot of the biggest problem that Detroit had against Minnesota in the first game when it came to shutting down the run was they didn't contain well. Whether it was Darius Slake coming in too fast and from the sideline and Adrian Peterson just being able to take one sidestep and get to the outside, or whether it was Devin Taylor or whoever else. Actually, I think Phillip Hunt was a pretty big offender in that game too.
That's part of why he's not around anymore.
Obviously, he's not going to be lurking in this one. So that's part of the reason that I think that it's still an advantage for Detroit, because they are coachable things. But as far as the biggest advantage for Minnesota coming into this one, I think it's their attacking style of defense. That's what really kind of put Chicago on its heels this past week. Detroit doesn't do well with teams that try to get up the field and get into the backfield, as is usually Detroit's motto on defense. There were times, and this is outside zone runs, where they were 3-4 yards. The offensive line was 2 to 4 yards down the field before the running back even hit the line of scrimmage on an outside zone. We haven't seen that this year. It's usually been the offensive line trying to flow along the offensive line, or more than likely 2 yards behind it, trying to create a crease. So it really helped Detroit run the ball last week. That's not the way Minnesota plays. They really got into the backfield and caused a lot of problems for Detroit in week 2. So I think that's the biggest problem that Detroit has to overcome this week.
So you know what they need to do? They need to play their best blocker, which is fullback Michael Burton, and get him out there to open those holes.
So let me.
That sounds like logic.
It almost makes too much sense. So with the advantage, Brandon, you saying it being the run defense, which team has more rushing yards in this game, Detroit or Minnesota?
I'm going to go with Minnesota anyways, because they'll stick with that run. Detroit won't necessarily. I mean,
it's going to be interesting to see where the carries go. I mean, how healthy is Joique Bell? And with how depleted they are, he has to get a heavy workload regardless, right? They can't give a ton of carries to George Wynn.
I think Amir Abdullah will be getting the bulk, and probably overwhelmingly so, unless that injury is still a problem. But he had a stinger last game, I think. They said he wasn't benched. He had a stinger, which, well, who knows?
He's got to be on a short leash with the fumble issues, though.
He had a stinger on his arm?
They claimed a stinger, but it's funny how those injuries happen right after a fumble.
Right? On my hand. Oh,
well, where do you see? I mean, you're the statistical guy here, the guy who digs into the data. Do you think Joique Bell or Amir Abdullah is going to have more carries in this game, Ken?
I think Abdullah is going to get more carries. Bell has not been himself, and I use that term loosely. You guys know I'm not a huge fan of Bell's play, but even that, he hasn't been playing like he did at the end of last year, even at the beginning of the last year. Honestly, I would give anything right now to have old 2.6 yard per carry Joique Bell from the first 6 weeks of 2014. But well, it's better than 1.1 yard per carry, Joik Bell. That's
I was
First
gonna
and
say
10
2.5
turns into
times
second
as
and 9 a
much.
lot with Joik Bell this year.
Thank God he legally changed his name because that was such a mouthful to say last year.
But he's been hurt. He's had three separate leg surgeries. He had an ankle, a knee, and his Achilles that he had to deal with, or maybe it was a calf and Achilles, I forget. But I know he had a knee and his Achilles injury, and then a third injury that he had to deal with. And it's obvious when he hits that line that he's hitting it slow and tentatively. And when you're that kind of player that thrives on contact, you can't be tentative because you don't have the speed to make up for it. If Amir Abdullah hesitates at the line, and he has a chance to still get away because of how quick he is and how he's able to burst away from contact. But Bell doesn't have that. He needs to hit somebody and try to bounce off of him, and he wasn't doing that.
Let's do some bold predictions. Folks, last week, Brandon, I believe yours was just Detroit gets a win. Well, that was pretty bold when your team's 0-5. They did get the W. I went with Detroit having no turnovers. There was some fumbleitis in this game that prevented such a thing. This week, I got Detroit winning again, and that's going to spoil my prediction coming up. But Detroit wins the football game. Still bold for a team that just isn't very good. Brandon, where are you at on the bold prediction?
Yeah, I think we should probably stall, give Ken a minute since we just decided to spring that on him. But I'm actually, and I don't know why. I do know why. I just can't believe I'm going to actually do it.
Do it.
Joik Bell scores a touchdown.
Hey!
He's the only guy in that backfield that they're probably going to trust if they get inside the 5-yard line. You can't let Amir Abdullah fumble the ball, although if you do trust a player, you should put him in every position. I don't really trust his coaching staff to use that thing that Kent used, not logic. I don't expect him to use logic, probability, or any type of evidentiary analysis. So I'm going to say Joik Bell gets a touchdown this game.
I've actually got a bold prediction for this game, and I had it
Perfect.
beforehand. You guys always spring that bold prediction on me and expect me to have some. I'm going to go with Theo Riddick having 2 touchdowns in this game. I think he gets a rushing touchdown, and I think he gets a receiving touchdown. I actually was thinking out like the specifics, trying to think of what would they do with Theo Riddick to make that happen. I think that his rushing touchdown is going to come out of one of those like 5-yard plays where they give it to him from the shotgun and he's able to make that little push that he was able to do this past week. Things that he does in the receiving game well, I think that he's going to get one of those. I'm not going to say lucked into it. That's kind of insulting the way that Riddick plays, but not the way he normally gets points. The second one's going to be the typical Theo Riddick touchdown. They're going to either motion him from the backfield or have him in the slot and run that slant route.
So from Kent, we've got the 2 touchdowns for Riddick. Brandon, Joik Bell with a TD. I'm going with the Detroit victory. That leads into the prediction. It's 27-17 for Detroit. Give me another back-to-back wins for Detroit. Still, I don't think this is a very good football team. I just don't believe in Minnesota right now either. Brandon, where are you at?
I can't get this far behind Detroit after one game. I don't trust Caldwell or Lombardi to stick to this downfield throwing thing. I got to go with Minnesota. I just think they at least have an identity and know who they are. I'm going to go with Minnesota 23-14.
Kent?
God, that's actually the hardest part to figure out, isn't it?
Yeah. Go with a tie, Kent.
And you even knew this question was coming. It's the end of every show.
I did, and I've been thinking about it too. I do think that Detroit wins. I don't think it's going to be a pretty win, and I think that you're going to have more people critical of this win than they did of this past one, which from this very podcast you could tell we were pretty darn critical of it. I think Detroit gets a win. I think it's going to be within 2 points. I can't really think of the exact point. You're going to be like 2 points away. Like somebody's going to miss a field goal, and it's going to be Minnesota that misses a field goal. We got Matt Prater. I'm going to leave it at that. We got Matt Prater. We're going to win.
And if anyone is keeping track at home for right now, I'm 3-3 on these predictions. Brandon is 4-2.
So yeah, and also from Kent's lips to God's ears, we'll see how Detroit plays this week, folks. You can always weigh in each and every week on anything you hear on the show or anything you'd like us to address in the next one. You can find us on Facebook, Lions Central Radio. You can find the show on Twitter at Lions Central PFC. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Alisoglu. That's ALISOGLU. You can find Nick Kostora on Twitter at Nick Kostora, KOSTORA, and also, of course, our esteemed guest, Ken Platt, at MathBomb, spelled exactly how it sounds, and he's a sideline report writer as well. We appreciate it, Ken, as always.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and folks, we'll talk to you next week. Hope some of you get up for that 9:30 game. I think it's Bills-Jags. I'm sure we'll all be tuning in pretty attentively to that one.
Here.
It'll be on Yahoo.com, not actually televised. Fun fact. Until next week, for Brandon Alisaglu and Kent Platt, thanks for joining us all show. I am Nick Kostora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.